Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical themes in Bayern Munich's 1-1 draw at RB Salzburg. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on how both sides look to press, then we'll shift to the system issues that they encountered, and lastly we'll focus on how Bayern Munich improved in the second half. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Bayern starting in their 3-2-4-1 and Salzburg playing in their 4-3-1-2 midfield diamond. So first we'll look at how both sides look to press, and Bayern Munich did a very good job of ensuring that Salzburg couldn't build attacks out of the back. They had Lewandowski and either Muller or Sane stepping towards the center backs. Gnabry and Coman were positioned higher up the pitch, so they would close down the fullbacks. And then in that midfield zone, because you have one of Muller or Sane stepping towards Kamara, and then Kimmich and Tolisso can deal with the midfield shuttlers. That ultimately leaves 3v3 up front, and that was one of the issues that Bayern Munich encountered despite the fact that they weren't outnumbered in that zone. The reason that they encountered those issues was solely due to the space that was available out in the wider areas. And while Bayern Munich did a very good job of ensuring that Salzburg couldn't build attacks out of the back, it was when they lost possession in those central areas that Salzburg were looking to initially break forward in transition and then slide the ball out into those areas for the front two or Aronson to break into to run at the center backs. If you focus on that midfield zone, due to the two shapes, it's ultimately 4v4 because you have Kimmich and Tolisso in those deeper central areas and Muller and Sane operating centrally as well, just in behind Lewandowski. There were several occasions in that opening half where Bayern lost possession in tight spaces in central areas, and Sane was a repeated offender. In those situations, you would often see Kamara carrying the ball forward and then looking for the runs of the front two or Aronson to break in transition. The one alteration that RB Salzburg had to make was that Okafor wasn't able to continue throughout the game, so Adamu did operate up front with Adeyemi, and he did a very good job of holding off defenders and providing a reference point up front to play long balls into, and from there he was looking for support to link play with his teammates. But ultimately in that opening half, the biggest issue that Bayern Munich encountered was that due to the high positioning of Gnabry and Coman, what ended up happening was that when Salzburg won the ball, there was enough space in those areas to get their runners in those positions to run at the center backs, and Kimmich and Tolisso were often caught a bit higher up the pitch, so they were unable to provide cover. Here we see Leroy Sane running into traffic in the Salzburg third and focus on Aronson's position just ahead of the center backs. As Sane is dispossessed, the ball falls into the path of Aronson and it also bypasses Tolisso and Kimmich, and you can see that Hernandez is now looking to retreat as Aronson can now run at the back three. What Aronson does well here is that he locates Hernandez retreating, and that's where he sees the ample space just in behind him in the right channel zone, and he slides the ball across the center back to play an Adeyemi who's breaking into that area. What Bayern do well here is that Sula is shifting across to cover for Hernandez, and as you can see, the only help that Adeyemi has is Aronson looking to make a run forward. But as we speed up this attack, Adeyemi is running at Sula, but Bayern do a very good job of having three players around Aronson's run towards the penalty area, and as Sula is showing Adeyemi the right half space zone, that results in Adeyemi looking to take him on and cut central as Aronson is no longer a passing option in that area, and when he looks to take on Sula, the center back wins possession. The build up to Salzburg's opener does witness a poor touch from Gnabry, and Muller being dispossessed at the edge of the Salzburg penalty area by the Salzburg defensive midfielder. When Kamara does receive the ball, he locates the movement of Adeyemi off Hernandez, who's poorly positioned, and that's where he clips the ball in towards the right channel zone, but when the ball does drop, it bounces towards the right touchline and it allows Bayern to recover. Hernandez is able to shift across, but focus on the movement of Aronson and Adamu. What Adeyemi does well is that he's able to cut across Hernandez to come central, and from there he does witness Aronson continuing his movement towards the final third, and Adamu occupying Sula and Pavard. But as Adeyemi continues his run, he pulls away Tolisso and Kimmich, and here it looks like he does want to play the ball into Adamu, but Aronson anticipates that pass, and before Pavard can step towards him, the gambling by the Bayern Munich right center back allows Aronson to delicately flick the ball over his challenge into the path of Adamu, and before Sula can make a last-ditch tackle, from that position he fires a first-time effort effort beyond the keeper to put Salzburg ahead. Therefore, when we focus on the manner in which Salzburg looked to press, what we witnessed was that in those early stages, they were looking to close down from the front immediately. They had the front two stepping towards Sula and Hernandez, and then Aronson was dealing with the deepest lying midfielder, whether it be Kimmich or Tolisso. It was often Kimmich who was dropping off into those deeper areas to receive the ball, and there, when you look at that midfield zone, you have the two shuttlers that could deal with Tolisso, and then one could drop off to Muller or Sane while Kamara deals with the other player. That leaves the center backs with Lewandowski, and then the fullbacks can shift over to deal with Gnabry and Coman. But what we ended up seeing from RB Salzburg was that when Pavard would receive the ball as the open man, that's where they ended up having one of their shuttlers stepping forward to close him down, and that would make it a 4v4 in that area. That ultimately doesn't really change the scenario here for RB Salzburg. The only difference is that now you have Tolisso, who is the spare man, and you did witness scenarios where the goalkeeper or the center backs were clipping out the ball towards him, and Bayern were able to bypass that press. But here what they could do is that they could have Capaldo stepping towards Tolisso, Kamara dealing with Muller or Sane depending on where the ball is situated, and that's where you would need a center back to step forward to close down Leroy Sane. While this was an effective pressing strategy in the early stages, as that game progressed, what we witnessed was that when the shuttler was stepping towards Pavard to close him down, Muller was now shifting laterally into that zone to receive possession, and from there that forces Ulmer to step towards Muller, and then the center back to shift across to deal with Gnabry. The issue that Salzburg encountered with Ulmer stepping towards Muller and the center back being pulled out towards Gnabry is that it creates space for Sane to break into, as he ends up running off the central midfielders. And if Gnabry and Muller are capable of retaining possession and dropping it off to each other or Pavard, then Bayern simply have an outlet in that zone to free Sane to run at the backline that's pulled out of position. Here we see Salzburg's press in full effect, and focus on the positioning of Sane as he shifts laterally and pulls away Kamara, and focus on Gnabry dropping off deeper to receive the pass from Pavard, and from there he's looking to drop off the ball in towards Muller, and that's where you could see Sane running off Kamara in towards the right channel. When Muller receives the ball, look at the separation that Sane has already created from Kamara, and you can see that Gnabry and Muller have pulled two Salzburg players out of the game. That results in Muller clipping the ball in towards the right channel for Sane, and from there it's either Kamara or the center back that can come across to slow down the attack. And as we watch that play develop, Sane carries the ball into right half space, but it's Kamara who does a very good job of holding him up and forcing Leroy Sane backwards to halt the Bayern Munich counterattack. And ultimately, in those situations, if Bayern were looking to play from the left, you would have the shuttler sitting deeper and then stepping out towards Pavard. And then what you would witness on that right-hand side was that Muller and Gnabry would have a 2v1 against Ulmer. In that opening half, Bayern Munich enjoyed success bypassing that press by playing diagonal balls out towards Gnabry, and at times you would see that 2v1 overload. And there were times where you witnessed Lewandowski making runs in between the center backs to receive the ball. Coman in that opening half was receiving the ball in deeper positions and then forced to win challenges out in that zone as Capaldo would shift across. Frankly, in that opening half, RB Salzburg encountered more success when they had the front two dropping off the back three and then pressing accordingly. So if the ball was shifted out towards Pavard, have a striker shift over towards him and have the spare striker dealing with Sula, and vice versa, with the striker stepping towards Hernandez and the spare man stepping towards Sula. In that scenario, you don't need a midfield shuttler stepping towards Pavard, and then you could have him dropping off on Muller to ensure that there are no overloads out in that channel against Ulmer. Outside of that, the only real threat that Bayern Munich looked to pose from open play was through the movement of Sane as he was dropping off into that midfield zone to check into the ball, and then sprinting off his marker, whether it be Capaldo or Kamara, to break into advanced positions in pockets of space between the center backs or the center backs and the fullbacks, and he was simply looking for a long ball over the top to break free on goal. The reason why this was an issue was that none of the Salzburg midfielders were tracking his movement, and he was simply making free runs into those pockets of space, but his teammates weren't finding him when he broke into those zones. Following Coman being taken out of the game by a poor challenge, the ball falls to Kimmich, who's now looking to split two Salzburg players to play in Leroy Sane dropping off the center back. Sane anticipates Kimmich's lateral movement across Aronson, so he drops off the ball back into the path of Kimmich and focus on the movement down the right side. You could see that all Salzburg's four midfielders are taken out of the game, and the 2v1 is about to be created as Muller and Gnabry are calling for the ball in the right channel. Kimmich clips a diagonal ball out towards Gnabry, and from there focus on Sane's run off of the midfield quartet, and you could see the 2v1 being created as Ulmer shifts across. As that play develops, what ends up happening is that Gnabry can look to play in the overlapping Muller, but in this situation he looks to slide the ball across the Salzburg defender into the path of Sane, breaking in towards the penalty area, and from there you can see that there's no pressure being applied and Sane should get a good shot off on goal, but from that position he fires a low effort inches wide of the far post. Therefore, when we focus on how Bayern Munich improved in the second half, it was simply down to a few subtle alterations. Obviously, the main issue that they encountered in that first half was runners breaking in towards the channels, but the center backs did a very good job of stepping towards the ball. Kimmich and Tolisso also were better in terms of shifting laterally to attempt to break up that play, and we witnessed an improved effort from Gnabry, Sane, and Coman to track the runners breaking forward to ensure that RB Salzburg couldn't build counterattacks from deeper positions. In terms of their overall attack, the Salzburg press did decrease throughout that game, and what we ended up seeing was that they were dropping off into two banks of four with Aronson shifting near Kamada, whereas Capaldo and Zeivold did occupy wider positions. However, as that game progressed, Pavard and Hernandez now had more space to push forward as the strikers couldn't get out to close them, and Sula had more time on the ball to play diagonal balls out and towards the wide players in Gnabry and Coman. What we witnessed in those situations was that Gnabry often looked to break out towards the byline against Ulmer, and he struggled to get the better of the fullback. Muller often looked to make runs into the channel beyond Ulmer to receive the ball, but that threat was closed out, and then Sane continued to make deeper runs in towards that midfield zone and sprint in behind, but even in those situations, Bayern Munich failed to get him into legitimate goal scoring positions. In that midfield zone, Tolisso and Kimmich did encounter more time on the ball. Tolisso was often shifting out into the inside left position to receive possession, and then it was the positioning of Sane and Lewandowski that was integral. Sane was now positioning himself ahead of the center back and the right back, and that was forcing Capaldo to shift narrow and creating a 1v1 position for Coman to receive the ball. There were times where Sane was also in that position and Lewandowski was now shifting into the gap between the center back and the right back, and that also forces that back line central and creates an avenue for diagonal balls to be shifted out towards Coman from Sula, Kimmich, or Pavard, or simply Tolisso and Hernandez having the passing lane to play balls out towards him. Now Coman was receiving the ball in the final third, and while his overall impact wasn't consistent, it was much more improved than his attacking teammates. When he was looking to cut in central and provide a creative threat, he was unable to connect with his teammates, whether it be intricate passes in towards the left half space or crosses in towards the back post. But when Coman served as a direct threat towards the byline, he caused the right back several issues by delivering crosses in that zone or looking to fake to cut towards the byline and then cut central to position himself in a legitimate goal scoring position. When Coman received the ball on deeper positions, Capaldo was able to shift across to provide cover and make it a 1v2. But when Sane adopted a narrow central position and dragged him into those areas, now Coman was able to have an impact, and along with Muller and Lewandowski occupying the center backs when they pushed forward, Bayern Munich were now able to get their left-sided attacking player into advanced positions, and that ultimately resulted in their best chances in that second half. Around the hour mark, it's Coman in a 1v1 against Christensen, and the only real cover that the right back has is from the center back. And what you end up seeing next is that Coman is being showed towards the byline, and he does well to drop his shoulder and then create space to carry the ball into that zone as Capaldo shifts across to provide cover in the central area. But Coman's okay with that as he carries the ball towards the byline, and here you can see a pullback passing avenue between Capaldo and the center back, and it could fall into Muller, Lewandowski, or Gnabry. but he ends up clipping the ball in towards the path of Gnabry, and from this position, 8 yards out, he ends up firing an effort that's blocked by his teammate. When we break down Bayern's late equalizer, it's Pavard carrying the ball into Salzburg's third, and focus on the penalty area. You have Choupo-Moting, Lewandowski, and Muller occupying the center backs and Christensen, and when that ball is clipped towards that zone, you could also see Capaldo looking to shift across to challenge the ball with the center back against Muller. What should be noted here is that now with Lewandowski and Muller taking those defenders out of the game and Capaldo also shifting to close down, you have an unmarked Coman breaking in towards left half space. Muller does a very good job of flicking the ball towards the path of Lewandowski, and there you can see that 2 Salzburg players are taken out of the game. Lewandowski is in a 1v1 with Christensen, and all he has to do is simply let the ball bounce over him to block off the right back, and it falls into the path of Coman breaking late towards the back post, placing him in a legitimate goal-scoring position to finish superbly and equalize the game. So as you can see, while RB Salzburg initially identified areas to exploit in Bayern's 3-2-4-1, Coman's second half direct threat was enough to ensure Nagelsmann's side avoided defeat.